قل هذه سبيلي أدعو إلى الله على بصيرة أنا ومن اتبعني وسبحان الله وما أنا من المشركين.
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for inviting us once again.
Jazakallah. How important is it to teach our kids the rights of the neighbors?
MashaAllah, this is a very important question because actually neighbors have a great status in Islam, and the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam put much emphasis on the importance of taking care of one's neighbors.
Who is considered to be a neighbor?
Well, that's a good question as well, because actually some people think, well, the neighbor is next door, you know. No, this is not necessarily true. The Prophet ﷺ informed us that the neighbors are up to 40 neighbors. Right, left, upstairs, downstairs, those are all your neighbors. So imagine that up to 40 houses to the right, 40 houses to the left, upstairs, downstairs, they're all neighbors who have the same rights like your next door neighbor.
The whole village will be my neighbor.
Well, why not? Why not?
What about the neighbor rights? Does the neighbor rights varies from one to the other?
Actually, this is answered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. في سورة النساء, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وبذي القربى واليتامى والمساكين والجار ذي القربى والجار الجنب والصاحب بالجنب وابن السبيل وما ملكت أيمانكم إن الله لا يحب من كان مختالا فخورا. I think we have discussed this ayah before several times while we're talking about the rights of the parents. Then we're talking about the rights of the kinship. وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وَبِذِي الْقُرْبَى. Then the orphans and the poor, al-yatama wal-masakin. Then there comes وَالْجَارِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى. Neighbors actually are one of three. Al-jari dhil qurba, one who has all the rights upon you because he's a neighbor, he's a relative, and he's a Muslim. So he has three rights upon you. Then, wal-jari dhil qurba, wal-jari al-junub, and your next door neighbor, or up to 40 as we say, but he's not necessarily your relative. So he's a Muslim and he's a neighbor, and he's got two rights. Then the third is a neighbor who's not a Muslim, but he happened to be your neighbor. That too, he has rights upon you, as Islam taught us, and as the Prophet ﷺ instructed us to do. Then وَالصَّاحِبِ بِالْجَنْبِ. Even if you're traveling in a journey, then you have a person who's sitting next to you. He's also considered to be a neighbor. You see how beautiful is our deen?
MashaAllah. It reminds me of the story of Abdullah ibn Omar that you were telling me a while ago. How when he used to have his servants slaughtered, he would give the food to his neighbors first, even though they were
You know, the interesting part about this story that Sayyiduna Abdullah ibn Umar's servant was slaughtering a sheep and processing the meat. And Abdullah ibn Umar said, don't forget to begin with our next door neighbor who happened to be Yahudi. He was a Jew. So the servant was surprised. Why shall I begin with him? Begin with him. So he said, since I have heard Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saying that Jibril continued to enjoin to me to be nice to my neighbors to the point that I thought that my neighbors are going to inherit me.
What are the rights of my neighbor? What should I teach my children regarding their neighbors?
You know, they really vary. By the meaning, sometimes if you live in a rich neighborhood, you know, and everyone is rich, the rights will vary. Then if you are the rich person living in a poor neighborhood, Islam teaches us that it's your responsibility to teach your children to be kind and nice to the neighbors. For instance, if your neighbors are known to be fuqara, poor people, and their children likewise. So if you buy fruits, if you buy nice food, don't let your children to take it out while playing with the neighbor's children. because it hurts their feeling. Okay, that's one. If you buy them toys, and you know that the neighbor's parents cannot afford to buy their children likewise. So in this case, you have one of two choices. One is either you buy similar gifts to the neighbor's kids, or have your kids play with them indoor, so that they don't tease them and so on. Or at least share. Okay? Then of course, it is due upon us to pay visits to our neighbors. Share with them the happy moments, good occasion, as well as
sad occasions.
Sad occasions. Condolence, whenever there is a catastrophe, a disaster, the death of loved one, and so on, so that you don't know that they are sad because their son have died or their father have died, and you schedule the wedding of your son next day. You have to consider all those factors, and you watch for their feeling. Also, you know that sometimes in our societies, kids go and play outside in the open. So if they play soccer or play any game, and that annoys the neighbors, especially if they play during times of break and rest. So you have to instruct your children, well, we have to watch for the rights of the neighbors, and we have to be kind to them. Even though we like to play, but we have to consider that hurts them, that really bothers them. And the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi taught us that, Wallahi la yu'min, by Allah, he does not believe. Who? One whose neighbors do not feel secure from his harm. Even if he is a Muslim, even if he prays 5 times a day, but he does not have the quality of Iman. Remember, there is no difference between neighbors who are Muslims and non-Muslims in respect of the basic rights, taking care of them, paying their due respect, visiting them whenever they're sick, and so on. Sharing with them the happy moments, but make sure that your children would not socialize with the neighbor's children during the religious celebrations if they happen to be non-Muslims. This is very, very important.
If I have non-Muslim neighbors and the parents do not care for their children to have any association with mine, how can I teach my children to deal with that?
Well, kindness is a key. I remember a story that, Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, the great follower of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi, the great tabi'i, he had a non-Muslim neighbor, a Jewish neighbor. So he decided to sell his house. The neighbor decided to sell his house. The value of the house was 1,000 dinar, but he put it on sale for 2,000 dinars. So people who were interested in the house, they said that it's only a worth of 1,000. He said, yes, but look who's going to be your neighbor. It's Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak. So you have to be creative as how to inspire your children to be nice. Well, once your children hear and see you dealing and talking nicely to the neighbors, they will pick that from you. But once they see you that, once you enter home, you curse your neighbor and you talk to your wife bad about them, this is what will settle in their mind and heart.
Just by being kind to them, that will soften their heart.
Back to the old banner which we have to raise whenever we talk about any of the rights or the etiquettes, which is, who remembers? Set an example, be yourself
be a role
model. Talking about being a role model and the elders and so on.
What about helping the elders? I mean, how do we teach our children to have the proper etiquette towards our elders? Because where I'm from, in the West, we have no etiquette towards our elders. We ship them off to nursing homes. We don't move for them. We don't help them across the streets. We do absolutely nothing for them.
I remember that I had a student who was a revert. He was actually a Christian priest and he accepted Islam. He was 60 years old, 60 plus. Well, young kids used to call him by his bare name, However, he was my student and I couldn't just call him by his bare name like, Ryan. It was too much. So I asked him, well, you get to choose. Would you like me to call you uncle or mister or such and such? And I almost saw tears shining out of his eyes because he said, in the society, people don't recognize things like that. They have no respect whatsoever. I can't. Where I come from, where my deen teaches me, it teaches me that I have to pay due respect to you. You're much older than me. Even though you're my student and I'm your teacher, but I still have to respect you. Whether I'm your employer, teacher, if you're older, then I have to respect you. As a matter of fact, the Prophet ﷺ said in one hadith, ما أكرم شاب شيخا لشيبته إلا قيض الله له من يكرمه في شيبته. Which means that if a young man honors and respects an older person in their old ages, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will pay them in proportion, accordingly. When they get old, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make young people respect them as well. So it's actually a payback.
What about it?
Should I teach my children to stand up out of respect to their teachers or what?
We have actually a quotation that Sayyidah Fatima, may Allah be pleased with her, the daughter of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, whenever the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to visit her, she would get up to receive the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, her father, and she would hug him, and she would ask the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to sit on her seat. And once again, the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam received the lady who suckled him, Halim al-Sa'di, and her husband. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam got up and had them sit on his own outer garment, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He spread it beneath them so that they can sit and rest on it. And Sayyiduna Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, who was the leader of Al-Ansar, once was approaching, so the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam ordered them, get up out of respect for your leader, Sayyidukum, Sayyiduna Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. So it is recommended, as long as there is no sense of arrogance, that the person would assume that I'm better than everybody else or I'm a holy person. No, it's only a matter of respect.
What about a dream, Sheikh, that you had mentioned that the Prophet saw in this respect of respecting the elders?
I know, this is actually a sound hadith, was collected by Imam Muslim. Sayyiduna Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. And you know when we say radiyallahu anhuma, because him and his father were both companions, so may Allah be pleased with him and his father, said that once the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saw a dream. He said that, I have seen myself brushing my teeth with a miswak. You know, once again, this is another etiquette which is using the miswak regularly. And I noticed that there were two people next to me. A younger person than I, and an older person. And they were looking at me. So the Prophet ﷺ assumed that they wanted also the miswak to brush their teeth. So the Prophet ﷺ handed over the miswak to the younger person. And he was told in the dream to begin and to hand it over to the older person. So it is out of respect to give it to the elder person. And once there was a Prophet ﷺ sitting in the masjid, and two people came to deliver the news to him, and they were rushing and so on. So one of them started talking. The Prophet ﷺ stopped them and said, Kabbir, Kabbir. Meaning, let the older person speak. Let the older person speak out of respect. Similarly, if we have a feast or a dinner and so on, and we're inviting an older person or a guest, that we should let the older people begin by serving the food, or we serve them first. This is out of respect. Practicing this before our children would make them pick up on the fact that we have to be respectful and respect elders, because this is one of the components of our adab of our deen.
MashaAllah. Usama, speaking of adab, do you have wudu?
No, I need to.
You need to make wudu?
Yeah.
Afzal, do you have wudu?
Now we have to make wudu, inshallah.
So inshallah, we'll go...
We'll resume, inshallah, after you guys perform wudu. It's very, very important to maintain the state of purity and tahara and wudu. So we'll wait for you.
Inshallah.
Many people trying to get together, but all their efforts were in vain because of ignoring or turning away from this great foundation. We see many people coming to the way of truth, following the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but later on, they get off track. What is the reason behind that? Unity is a result, it's not a cover-up. We have to be united from inside. And Allah made this clear in the Quran when He said, وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ.
Welcome back. I hope that you remember to say the dua after performing wudu.
What dua?
Didn't you know? That the Prophet ﷺ said in one hadith that one who performs wudu properly, then follows the wudu by this beautiful dua, which is أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا عَبْدُهُ وَرَسُولُهُ, which is basically the kalima. I bear witness that there is no God who is worthy of worship but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is His servant and His messenger. Guess what? Whoever says so, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open for him the different gates of paradise. 8 gates of paradise will be open wide for him to choose to enter paradise from whichever gate he wishes. So it's very, very recommended to perform wudu regularly and follow the wudu with this beautiful dua, of course.
MashaAllah. Yeah, Sheikh, since we've been talking about the elders and neighbors and their rights and the etiquettes towards them, what about the etiquettes towards our kids' teachers?
As a matter of fact, this is one of the most important etiquettes which we should talk about it. And parents have a great role to play in teaching and disciplining their children the due rights of the teachers and to pay them due respect. It's very, very, very important.
Especially if he's a religious teacher who teaches him how to memorize Quran.
Yeah, especially if he's a righteous teacher teaching him the Quran and the Sunnah and so on. The Prophet ﷺ was reported as saying that لَيْسَ مِنَّا مَنْ لَمْ يُجِلْ كَبِيرَنَا وَمَنْ لَمْ يَرْحَمْ صَغِيرَنَا وَمَنْ لَمْ يَعْرِفْ لِعَالِمِنَا حَقَّهُ. Setting the rules of respecting elders, having mercy on the children, and paying due respect to the scholars and teachers. He says, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, one who does not honor and respect elders does not belong to us. He's not from our ummah. And one who does not have mercy on youngsters, similarly, he's not one of us. And one who does not recognize the virtues of the alim and pays him his due respect, similarly, he is not one of us.
So what are the guidelines that we should pay to the teachers?
No, actually, you brought up a very important thing, which is we have to formulate, a plan as how to teach our children to respect their teachers and so on, and why. Number one and foremost is at-tawadu', being humble before your teacher. Even if the teacher is poorer than you, even if he's been employed by your parents and so on, parents have to assist their children to understand that teachers are something that's very, very great. We have to respect them first by respecting them themselves in front of their children. And actually, the student before the teacher should consider himself as a patient who's visiting his physician. You don't argue with the physician when he prescribes for you such and such antibiotic or analgesic. You just take it as it is because you trust him. So there has to be trust. There has to be humility and humbleness before the teacher. I remember Imam al-Shafi'i, may Allah have mercy on him, that his teacher, one of his teachers was Imam Malik, Imam Ahl al-Madinah. Imam al-Shafi'i used to say that, I hated flipping the pages in the prisons of Imam Malik. So I used to do it very quietly, not to make noise, lest that will interrupt and disturb the attention of Imam Malik. Just imagine.
That reminds me of Abdullah ibn Abbas and Zayd ibn Thabit, in the story that he used to camp out in front.
Radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. You know Abdullah ibn Abbas?
Yeah.
The Prophet ﷺ prayed for him to increase him in knowledge and so on and make him understand the deen. And he was actually the Prophet's cousin, the son of Al-Abbas.
He's a companion and the son of a companion.
Naam. However, Zayd ibn Thabit was a scholar and he was older than him. So Sayyiduna Abdullah ibn Abbas used to camp overnight before the door of the house of Sayyiduna Zayd ibn Thabit. And the khadim, the servant, would say, shall I wake him up? Or you say, no, don't disturb him. I will wait. Just to listen to a hadith or two. And once Sayyiduna Abdullah ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him and his father, was seen. He was assisting Sayyiduna Zayd ibn Thabit. He got hold of the stirrup of his horse, and he was assisting him to get on the back of his horse. So Zayd ibn Thabit said, no, don't do that, please. He said, هَكَذَا أُمِرْنَا أَن نَفْعَلَ بِعُلَمَائِنَا. Thus, we were commanded to pay due respect to our scholars. You see, even though he was the Prophet's cousin, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
Sheikh, Osama, he mentioned about giving respect to one who teaches the Quran. I recall a narration that during the times of Uhud, the Prophet ﷺ used to bury 2 and 3, but he gave precedence to those who have memorized more Quran.
That's absolutely right. Since there was not too many graves, and there was about 70 companions who were murdered on the Battle of Uhud. So Nabi ﷺ used to bury 2 and 3 in the same grave. And he would say, see, whoever have more Quran and knowledge, and he would introduce him first to the grave, Sallallahu Alaihi. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. You know, even concerning knowledge, people are levels. So you give precedence to one who's more knowledgeable and so on. Talking about paying respect and so on, you know, we have heard that Al-Imam al-Shafi'i used to, flip the pages quietly. Al-Imam al-Shafi'i became a teacher, and one of his students said that, by Allah, I never dared to have a drink in the presence of Al-Imam al-Shafi'i out of respect. That reminds me with
the story you were telling us before. He told me, because I also used to teach, and he told me the story of
when I was teaching in the States, sometimes in a public school. This is awful. You know, and when you compare this to the Islamic teachings, you feel the beauty of our religion, which is full of adab and so on. That sometimes in one session, that a child or a student spend the entire time eating and drinking. He has a double burger sandwich and a lira and a half or 2 liras of drink, and he was just consumed the entire time eating while the teacher was giving the lesson. And there was another girl who spent the entire time putting on makeup and so on. This is, of course, unacceptable period. A Muslim student have to be very, very attentive and not miss a word, so that in the presence of the teacher, pay close attention, pay due respect. You should not enter the classroom without his permission. You should not leave the classroom without his permission. Never talk to others in his presence, because this is one of the most important etiquettes of respecting the teachers and so on. And there's another thing, which is sometimes kids and students like to, to put their teachers at fault and show them as they don't know much and so on. By bringing in the classroom or during the lesson that an opinion of another teacher, which opposes his opinion. This is absolutely refused. You have to respect the teacher, and you can install this in the mind of your child through instructing them as how should you attend the class.
Okay. What about teaching my children to kiss the hands of their teachers?
Well, especially if they are ulama ud-din, teaching my children the deen and so on. Unfortunately, many people assume that a person who's memorized the Quran or who's a Quranic teacher is a low society category, is poor and so on. So similarly, the children would treat him likewise. He's a poor person. He's coming to teach me the Quran because he can't find any other job. While the fact is totally the opposite. They are the best of the best. So showing respect, kissing their hands sometimes is recommended, but not to be as a habit, This is one of the ways that you can show respect. Standing up whenever they attend, being quiet in their presence, humbling yourself before them, listening attentively, and seeking permission before entering or exiting in their presence and so on.
So do you try to encourage your child to sit close to the teacher, to sit in the front row?
As much as you can. There is a very interesting hadith, but I understand that we don't have much time to discuss it, that the Prophet ﷺ recommended that you should, whenever if you attend, for instance, a session or a halqa in the masjid, especially where we sit on the carpet and so on, that if there is a gap and that you will not have to cross anybody's shoulder, that we can get closer to the speaker or the teacher, seize the opportunity. Why? The closer you are, the more attentive you are.
Inshallah.
Sometimes the teacher, the children might complain about the teacher being this or that. Many cases the children might be lying. How should the parents approach the teacher? Should they do it in front of their children, or?
Well, I'm glad you said that sometimes might be exaggerating, because we have two situations here. The first one, for instance, if the child comes home because the teacher punished him, an adequate punishment, without excessive punishment and beating and so on, for not doing the homework, discipline him because he was talking to somebody else during the class and so on. So the teacher should not be offended and react. They should first review with the teacher what have happened. Whether their child is telling the truth and quoting the exact story or not. This is very, very essential and important. And not every time their children receive a punishment, they have to make a big deal out of it. Sometimes they deserve it, and they know better about their children. For instance, Sayyiduna Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, may Allah be pleased with him. He was the son of the Amir, Abdul Aziz ibn Marwan. And he was studying at Al-Madinah al-Munawwara. and he was late for the time of the Salah and attending the dars with his teacher. So he missed the first takbirah in the masjid of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. His teacher asked him, what kept you late? Perhaps there was a valid reason. You have first to verify and find out. Maybe the child was sick, couldn't do his homework because, also there are adab that the teachers have to pay attention to. His parents were sick or etc. So he said, well, مرجلتي كانت ترجل شعري. He had a maid that she was combing his hair. He said, that's it. So right away he wrote a letter to his father, Abdul Aziz ibn Marwan. Abdul Aziz verified that, and he knew that combing his son's hair kept him late from attending the Salah with the first takbir. Guess what was the punishment? He punished his son. He shaved his hair. Al-jaza'u min jinsil amal. But the second case, if you happen to put your son in a school where there is a secular teacher, a teacher who's not practicing Islam and not religiously committed, or sometimes a non-Muslim teacher, and you find out that the teacher is teaching your son the opposite of what Islam teaches, is teaching your daughter that, hijab is not necessary and it's not important and it's not fard. As a matter of fact, some local teachers say so. They poison the mind of our children. At that, you should be angry. Yeah. At that, you should not ignore it and say, everything, I'm going to make a big deal out of it and go to the school and talk to the principal. No, you should. You and the parents, the union of the parents, should make a point that they talk to the administrator or the principal, and the teacher have to be removed away because he is poisoning the mind of our children. So we have to keep balance between paying due rights to the teachers who are respected, righteous, teaching our children whether it is religion, Quran, or science, physics, chemistry, medicine, anatomy, or whatever, and making sure that if the teacher transgresses the boundaries and limits and starts poisoning the mind of my children, I should not tolerate that. That should never be tolerated by any means.
It's time to pray. So let's get up and let's make our
بسم الله سبحانك اللهم بحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. I will see you again inshallah.